Okay, so we are live. I almost couldn't find the button. So that just goes to show you the kind of week I have been having. But anyway, just to make sure you're in the right place, this is Stories Live. It is Wednesday, February 17th. And we are coming at you from Denver, or actually, technically, this is my office in Aurora, lovely, lovely Aurora. So let's see. Tonight we have got a very illustrious roster here. We've got Katie Webster, who's going to be leading us off. Dana Bell, the lovely Helen Starbuck, Emily Bybee, and Pam Houston, who you might not recognize her name, but she wrote Cowboys Are My Weakness, which I definitely have a weakness for that book. And she's going to be sharing some more recent stuff tonight. So very excited about that. Let's see. Somebody is sending me. Oh, okay. All right, Emily, I got your comment. All right. So I guess without further delay, I'm looking at Katie here. He seems like he's preparing. Are you ready, Katie? You need a minute? Let's see. Okay. Oh, I can't hear you. All right. Yes. See, we test audio and then things happen.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Now I can hear you.
Okay, let's do it like that. And let's do it like this. And hi there.
Hi. So how are you doing tonight?
I'm good now. I got my coffee, so I'm good.
All right, awesome. So what are you going to be reading tonight?
Something I've never done before. I'm going to try my hand at romance.
Romance?
Yes, so I'm going to try a romantic short story. I mean, wow. I think it can be considered romance. Maybe, sort of, kind of. I'm new to this whole emotion stuff.
Oh, the emotion stuff. Yes, I know. The feelings are so weird, really. I don't have them anymore. I've decided that they just aren't worth the time.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Anyway, Katie, I will let you go forth and read your thing.
Okay. All right, let's do it. So it's called The Lady in Gray. And well, I've been trying to think of where would be the best place to start this. I mean, I can't say this is going to be a clear-cut story. I can't say the colors are going to stay within the lines. I mean, I'll try, but this isn't going to be one of those black and white stories. There's bound to be a few shades of gray here and there. But I'll do my best to keep it as linear as possible. So my story begins one morning in a coffee house, an indie shop called the Mean Mug on the northern edge of Atlanta. The Mean Mug was one of those coffee and sandwich shops favorited by the local high school and college set. It was founded by 3 military veterans of recent Middle East campaigns. Now, the story around the place is that they found they had three things in common. Each was from Brooklyn, each had a love for good coffee, and each had decided they had enough of war. Atlanta was the place to start anew. I guess the mean mug was the perfect name for three grizzled old vets running a coffee house. They also got the occasional vet in whenever word got around about the owner's backgrounds. I guess that's one of the reasons why I stumbled across the place that morning, me being former Air Force and all. So it was one morning at the Mean Mug when I saw, wait. So I know I should probably start this story from the beginning, right? But instead, I'm going to start it with a cliche. What is love? Yeah, I know. So no need for the commentary, but let me dial it in a bit. Now, emotions are inherently fickle animals, but at least most of them are easily defined. Happiness, fear, disgust, sorrow, joy. Those creatures are, for the most part, clear to see at face value. Of course, there are a couple of exceptions, one of them being hate. Sometimes hate is covered so well, he creeps up on you like a stalking vulture, intentionally out of the line of sight so you don't see him coming. Sometimes he rears his ugly head like a lion attacking a hyena for stealing a fresh kill. Then there's love, a chimera of a beast that's not always easy to make out, not definitively defined, but definitely felt. One moment you get a case of the warm and fuzzies, the next you see feisty, fierce, and flirtatious. A many splendored thing indeed. Now, more often than not, love won't just announce herself. She won't put up a sign that says, danger, love is here. So watch your step. Maybe that's why you don't step into love, you fall in it. Even then, you don't know you're falling in love until, well, you've fallen in love. By that time, you're in deep. Like being lost in the woods. You're so busy chasing squirrels, I love squirrels, counting crows, smelling roses, and frolicking among the tulips, you don't realize you're now in unfamiliar territory and can't find your way back to where you used to be. And while you can't see the forest for all the trees, you're slowly and slyly being stalked by the cryptic chimera creature that is love. Then there's the lady in gray. From the instant I laid eyes on her, I recalled a line from something I read once. One glance and I'm lost. I've never seen anyone or anything so beautiful in my whole life. That line felt so true then, and even as I'm thinking about it, it feels true now. Being with her was the coolest heaven. Leaving her was the cruelest hell. She stood at 5'6" and $120, if that. She got her order, then walked by my table. A wink, a smile, and a hey there. Those two words were both sultry and ethereal at the same time. She may as well have said, come hither, and it would have held the same meaning. That walk, there was something about that walk. I mean, I couldn't call it a strut. Maybe a cross between a sachet and a tennis switch. I don't know. It's one of those things that wouldn't make sense unless you saw it. Like watching the pendulum on the grandfather clock. Look, I'll just say she had a walk that could hypnotize, and if you know what I mean, and I'll leave it at that. She wore this gray sweater dress that was accented with a black oversized belt that just, well, kind of hung off, you know? Her skin was a perfect caramel. You know those square, soft, brown sweets in the clear wrappers? Firm but chewy once they get in the mouth? that right there. She would let it grow out later, but the day I met her, her hair was short and close. The day I met her, the lady in gray. Even now, I can't seem to bring myself to say her real name. But if a year was a day, then it was morning when I met the lady in gray. There are so many things in this world I will gladly admit to having little to no knowledge of. Even longer would be the list of which I'm unsure to act upon. This was not one of them. I knew I had to get her attention. So the next day I stumbled into the mean mug again. Same time as before, rolling the dice that the lady in gray would show up again. Now, on the way to the coffee house, I ran through a list of pickup lines and scenarios. Every single one of them cheesy, none of them worth mentioning here. Nevertheless, I knew I had to say something, anything, even if it was everything or nothing in particular. Thing is, when I saw her looking every bit as beautiful as before, I couldn't get the words out. They got stuck in my throat. I thought to myself, come on, self, you're handsome, former military, 6-figure salary. You got the confidence, so you got this. So what did I end up doing? I raised my insulated cup as if to say, cheers. She smiled, picked up her order, and started for the exit. Meanwhile, I'm just staring at my drink, still looking like I'm about to toast a bride and groom. Really? Seriously? That's the best you can do? Now, either she heard me or saw my stupid reflection in the window. Either way, she stopped just short of opening the door and turned around. All while she's coming to my seat, I'm trying hard to get that deer in the headlights look off my face. Quite the 10-second performance there. I gave my cup a stern look, purely unintentional, I assure you. You know, when I saw you sitting in the same spot as yesterday, I expected a cheesy pickup line for some reason. No, not here, I said. The smile might be cheesy, though. Besides, do people still use pickup lines anymore? She smiled and noticed my name on the cup. You know, you're kind of cute. Well, time and life itself seemed to drift after that. We had so much in common with just enough differences to keep it interesting. She was one of the few that can hang with me when it came to Doctor Who. And for me, that's saying something. Her favorite Time Lord was the 11th. Mine was the 4th, followed closely by the 10th. We argued over which was better, Star Trek or Stargate. I once said that while Star Trek and Star Wars were pulling it out trying to see whose sides were biggest, Stargate would be lounging and chilling off in the cut saying, gentlemen, the universe is big enough for all 3 franchises. Now, she countered with, yeah, but that Captain Sisko, though, he not just pulls it out, he does it from the 9th floor dancing to dodge traffic. I was stunned. She finished me with, yeah, not just size, but length too. Now, I taught her how to play chess. When I first learned how to play chess, my teacher beat me 21 times before I won my first match. She beat me on the 5th game. She would dedicate love songs on the radio to me. I mean, on the radio. I didn't even know that was still a thing. Everything just felt right. Morning becomes afternoon with the lady in gray. She would become my first thought when I woke up and my last thought as I fell asleep. I would catch my breath just from a simple thinking of you text. A 1-week vacation to San Juan, Puerto Rico felt like a honeymoon. I wrote poetry. I mean, I hadn't written poetry in years, had felt inspired to. I find the true mystery, the lady in gray. She should not exist, yet in the witching hour she comes to me. She leaves me afflicted with affection for the touch of no one but hers. I wait for her to be her prey, pray for the night to stay. Yeah, I was in deep. Sometimes we made love just, taking our time, exploring each other's bodies as if for the first time, playing some quiet storm R&B or some smooth jazz, some Mary J. Blige in the background, some soft candlelight and some smell good wafting through the room. Our shadows along the wall, every bit as intimate as we were. Her taking me in her hand and saying, if I stroke him like this, how hard will it get? Or me kissing my way to between her legs, and how long do I lick that one spot before she clamps the thighs on my head and hits the high note? You know, that Anita Baker, sweet love, kind of making love. If you know the song, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know, well, YouTube. Then there were times it was just straight up primal sex, that give it to me now sex, that you choose, but one of us is getting molested sex, that we'll worry about the mess later sex, that face down, knees spread, butt smacking, split it and hit it and get it while it getting's good and getting deep sex, that Maxwell's till the cops come knocking kind of sex. If you know the song, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know, well, YouTube. Even our snoring seemed to balance each other out. She said mine was rhythmic and helped her sleep, like ambient white noise. Plus, she was a deep sleeper. I was a light sleeper, and her snoring was like the purring of a cat. She was a horrible cook, but I didn't care. She said since she was alone, she never put much work in the kitchen. Hadn't felt the need to. Her cooking tasted just fine to her. I told her no worries. Told her I was cooking since I was 15. So whenever I came over, I'd ask what she had a taste for and, well, just get to it. One day I came over and found a cookbook underneath a stack of her work papers. I said nothing about it, but that one cookbook told me she was in this for the long haul, just like I was. Everything just felt right. Everything was right up until it wasn't. Up until my world came crashing down. Up until I had to decide between duty and desire. Afternoon became evening with the lady in gray. Then came the night and a phone call from a number I couldn't ignore. A reminder of a promise I had made over a year ago. One I would have to honor. But I thought I had more time, I said. He's older now. He's asking for you. He keeps asking for you. I'm running out of things to tell him. But can't you two come here? You know we can't, and you know why. She was right, and I knew she was right. Several conversations over the next couple of nights would yield the same results. It all boiled down to the promise, to my duty, one that came before anything or anyone else. The following night, a conversation was had with the lady in gray, one equally as tough. You see, the lady in gray was bound to Atlanta. Her mother was in the early stages of dementia. Her father was battling cancer. He was winning the fight, but the chemo had been taking a toll. She had a younger brother just entering his senior year of high school. If bad went to worse, it would just be the two of them. So, no, she couldn't go. No, I couldn't stay. Yes, this is how a heart breaks. Evening becomes night with the lady in gray. Here's another emotion. What is despair? By definition, despair is a loss of hope. But if you go deeper, it's giving up on the life you want. Even worse is knowing there's a quality of life you enjoy and watching it slowly trickle away in bits and pieces. Knowing there's nothing you can do to stop it. Worse yet, knowing there were things you could have done, but you didn't. Instead, you simply watched it circle the drain because you told yourself it's for the greater good. A new day without the lady in gray. I'm happy now, rather as happy as I allow myself to be. Somehow, as if something out of a movie, I convinced myself that the lady in gray was just that, a gray area, a composite of what I saw as the ideal woman for me, a voice in my head, just another voice in my head. That it was leaving the city that I'd fallen in love with, the city of Atlanta, that broke my heart, not an actual living, breathing woman. Maybe that's why I can never say her name, because there was no name to say. Maybe I was in love with the idea of love, of the smell of lavender and jasmine, a spot in a tiger lily in the fantastic forest. But a part of me is still missing in those woods, lost with no hope, searching for something I will never find, still stalked by that chimera that is love, still haunted by the lady in gray. And that's it.
All right. Cool, Katie. I'm blushing now, though. I mean, that was a very adult story. So I don't know. Usually I expect that from, Jeff Wood or something, but I was like, okay, maybe I'm safe tonight, but no, Anyway.
It was my first attempt at romance.
Well, I think that you did okay. Helen seems to approve. All right, so let's see. I'll go ahead and let you off here. Just, don't go too wild. And I'll go ahead and add Dana here to our scream. I was about to say, I don't know. I think, yeah, where is my head at? Okay. So, Dana, what do you have for us?
Actually, it's Dana.
Oh, Dana, I'm sorry.
Everybody does it. It's okay.
Okay.
I'm used to it. I'm also sitting here with Taj on my lap.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, he's being a clingy boy right now.
All right. Yeah. Well, pets. We love the cat photo bombs in these shows. We always get cats. So, all right. So, yeah. So, what have you got for us?
Okay, I'm thinking of actually writing or reading from a portion of a couple of different short stories.
Okay.
One of them is from one that is an anthology collection of cat stories that I have coming out called Bass Chosen Ones and Other Cat Adventures. The other one is part of the Planetary anthology series, and this particular story would be in Saturn.
Okay.
I also have stories in Venus and Mars as well. But the first The first story here is called Darkness in the Heartland. And this one is actually based in a real place. I like this because there was a call out for angel stories, and she didn't expect to get something like this.
Oh, all right. I'll let you.
Okay. His paws hit the concrete slabs surrounding the fountain. Lifting his massive head, he sniffed the night breeze. The smell of humans, mixed with their food, flowers, trees, and other scents, including a timid rabbit nearby, tickled his nose. He wasn't there to hunt the rightful prey. His assignment was far different and much more important. He lowered his mouth to take a sip of water. It was cold and quenched his thirst. When he was finished, he used his tongue to clean his shoulder. It was difficult to go much further than that. His huge wings made grooming that annoying spot behind his neck almost impossible. He had to depend on others of his kind, the few who had been created, to do it for him. Several thumps sounded nearby. He stopped grooming and blinked his yellow-brown eyes. Shapes materialized out of the darkness. They were all orange with black stripes, their furred wings blending into their hide perfectly. Not that he would have expected it to be any different. It was the way the Creator made them. Circe jumped up on the slab, rising on her hind legs, placing her front paws on the pedestal. What appeared to be an open book rested there. It had writing etched into the copper pages. She chuffed, dropping down and padded over to him. "It's too bad their leader did not truly read the book," she said. "If he had, then we wouldn't have to be here." "True," he agreed. "But we are and must do what we have been sent to do. Gabron," she addressed him by his name. Her green eyes darted to the three others who joined them. "It has been long since we've been asked to do such. Too long." He gazed upon the three others, knowing each well. Limpet, who had battled the ultimate Dark One in a battle he had only heard stories of. Mutua, proud and lovely, with the honor of having been present at the birth of the sun. And Ginger, newest of their number and yet to prove herself. "We all know why we're here," Gabron said. The others sat on their haunches, their wings folded upon their backs. He didn't need to repeat their instructions. Gabron knew that, but he spoke anyway. "The first leader of this group has died. He left behind a proud, haughty pretender who takes advantage of women," he said as the females growled. "He increases prejudice against any who would not blindly follow him and pretends to follow the Most High when he instead serves the purpose of the Dark One." He opened his mouth, his large canines glistening in the faint moonlight. "He is destroying the lives of thousands of humans," Limpet hissed. "Our job is not to kill him, but to stop the theatrical production before it is presented. It will be in the main event tent." "Seems a silly thing," Ginger said, her head tilted as if she were puzzled. "This production will do much damage. The leader of this group has cast himself as the hero and the woman, who he sleeps with daily, as the villain. And they are not mated," Mortia said. "Such is not the will of the Creator. He was given this one a wonderful wife and child. So," Ginger lifted her paw and pulled at a claw with her teeth, "he does not appreciate what he has." "No." Gabron sniffed the breeze again. "Soon they will drift to their tents to sleep. Only a few will be awake to watch." A branch broke nearby. "A human comes. We must hide." Already in his mind the image of a small gully behind them where they would not be seen. Over it was a wooden bridge. The five drifted to the hiding spot, bedding down in the tall, sweet grasses as the creek gurgled nearby. Sometimes he heard laughing and humans speaking together. When the moon began to drop, silence reigned. It is time, he told the others. He rose and left the hiding place, walking once again past the beautiful fountain. Gabron found it unfortunate such a smothering darkness had sprung up in the Heartland. Nearby, cows mooed at each other, and the wind rustled through the fields, now tall with crops that soon would be harvested. He avoided the road. There were sentries there, not to mention those who stalked it to try and retrieve a lost loved one and bring them home. Instead, the winged warriors silently passed through the trees into the parking lot. Gabron glanced at the plate, surprised there were so many from the various states. A lone human sat in an open tent, humming to itself. It didn't see them. Once they had reached the camping area, he paused. Getting through the maze to where they needed to go would be tricky. They could not waken a human. Not that any would believe what they saw, or even if they did, they might think them demons instead of the Creator's messengers. This way, he instructed, leading the way past tents of various sizes and shapes. He paused now again as someone roused, making sure they did not wake before leading the others onward. Eventually, they came to a main area. Huge tents were set up everywhere. Some were for cooking and serving foods. Others were for the classes that were taught every day. Further on were buildings that housed the staff and the products that were sold during this meeting. In the center sat a huge tent, the top a striped green and white. This is where we must go. He padded forward, using his nose to push aside the light flap. Inside were rows and rows of chairs, of non-padded and hard benches lined the sides. In the center was a huge wooden stage. Upon it were stairs with poles and towers that looked sort of like ladders. There seemed to be a pit, and he could detect the scent of propane. Come. He trotted down the aisle, intent on beginning the needed destruction. He stopped, sensing something wasn't right. Out, demons! A brown-haired man appeared on the stage. A tight-fitting costume did little to hide his assets and showed off the trim, muscular figure. This is God's place. God's place? Gabron knew better. He gazed upon the human and saw the pure black evil consuming the human's blue eyes. Okay, this next story is in the Saturn that's released this month. It is part of my cat vampire stories, which began with a story called Chosen One and has taken on a life of its own. This one is about Shadow. She appeared in another story earlier, and she informed me that she wanted to be in this one. So it's called Doing My Job. I dined earlier on a rat I'd caught, draining its blood and leaving the carcass for the Holdmaster to find. He discovered my gift and put on gloves to dispose of the body by tossing it into the garbage chute. Eventually, it will be mushed and used to fuel the ship's engine. I approved of his action, since I lived on this vessel for many years. Retreating to my favorite spot, a stack of boxes located in the dark section of the hold, I took a well-deserved nap for doing my job. I woke much later, stretching long so my spine would be fluid. Jumping to the metal deck, my paws felt the subtle engine vibration. My tail flipped as I considered what to do next. Bob, the Holdmaster's son, always puts out water for me and does not understand why I never drink it. Thirsty rats enjoyed my water, and it served as a good trap for them and easy hunting for me. Bast made me one of her chosen ones before the long winter covered the earth. From time to time she appeared, giving me important tasks, or I'm ignored for many turns of the moon. I do not mind. It has allowed me to travel and explore not only the planet I had not seen since mankind took to the stars, but the other worlds or moons where humans needed protective suits. Mixed smells tickled my nose. Pungent, unwashed humans, stale, dry air, hints of spicy foods the cook prepared, or the rare fresh scent of green plants used to clean the air and produce more oxygen. A new rancid scent reminded me of lizard musk or snake stink, yet nothing I ever encountered before. Curious, I sniffed to see which direction it came from. Leaving the cargo hold, my paws touched the chilled deck plates as I ventured through dimly lit quarters. "Hey, Shadow!" Bob greeted me. Young teenager wore gray coveralls and kept his brown hair short. Most of the crew adopted the custom, so they used less water to keep clean. He kneeled down and I allowed him to scratch behind my ear. "Exploring?" he asked. My head butted his warm hand, asking for more attention. He stroked my back and ran his tail up my fluffy tail. "You're doing a good job," he praised me. "Captain is pleased." "Well, of course he is. I know how to deal with uninvited rodents." "Coming, Bob?" his father called. "Need to organize our next delivery." The older man limped down the hall, heading for the main hold. He'd been working for a long while. Bob ran a finger along my muzzle before hurrying on. "On my way, Dad." Our ship, Falconer, served as a supply ship. They had been contacted for a run between Mars colony, the asteroids, and the new colonies on various moons around the gas giants. Their final stop will be Rhea, one of Saturn's moons. In many ways, it's surprising the survivors of the Ice Age, humans and others, caused by Yellowstone's massive eruption, are back in space. Some escaped on colony ships bound for charted world, while others burrowed into deep nests or tried to escape by fleeing further south. When the sky cleared and the planet recovered, they crawled out of their safe places and rebuilt. Oh, it took time, with many conflicts, before the ruling lords took over and brought stability. They graciously allowed the space industry to be rebuilt, and a few brave souls took long journeys to various planets to establish new hulls. None yet ventured beyond the boundaries of the Sol system. My tail twitched as I paused, waiting to catch the odd reptilian odor again. I turned my head before finding it again. I followed the mustiness beyond the ladder leading up to the other levels of the ship to a short, dark corridor. The crew never went there. A chuffing, reminding me of a large predator, reached my ears. Not a sound I expected to hear. Similar to ones I'd heard long ago, when creatures of orange or white with black stripes roamed the land the humans had come from. Tigers, I think they've been called. I found a sealed door with a genetic lock. Only the one who had placed it there would be able to open it, or their approved agents. I found a sealed door with a musky lizard oozed under the door. I smelled a feline as well, but not one whom I was familiar with. I sat down and contemplated the situation, trying to decide how I might best get beyond this barrier and discover what lay hidden. The door shuddered, as if something large struck the other side. I stood up on my hind legs with my front paws against the metal, waiting to see if it happened again. Since I could smell them, I decided beasts resided there, or perhaps those whose intelligence had been discovered. I shuddered, remembering those dark days. So many wolves, snow ghosts, and cats had died. I wonder who had locked the creatures in and why, and when. I had seen no one on board do this terrible thing. The door shuddered again. I sat down, tilting my head, trying to decide what to do. "Who are you?" A rumbling voice echoed inside my head. I sensed great age. I curled my tail over my paws. "Who are you?" I returned. "There is power in a name." Ah, this belief I understood. "Are you a captive?" "I was just digging." "Digging?" "I'm an archaeologist." One who studied the past, a profession forbidden by the lords. They feared anyone discovering what life had been like before they took control. They had done their best to destroy all known records, although I knew of one place they had missed and never found. The location had been my last mission from Bast. She had wanted to make certain it stayed secure. Luckily, the tall grasses and terrifying storms sweeping across the plains helped protect the knowledge sanctuary. To which planet are we headed? The voice wanted to know, stopping my recall. Not a planet, a moon, Rhea. Around the planet with the beautiful rings. How do you know of it? We passed it on our way to your planet. You are not like normal cats. No, I am a chosen one. Astounding! I have heard stories. Perhaps you will share with me how and when you were made. Why not? It's been a long time since I shared my tale. During the days of the witch trials, an old woman befriended me. They said I was her familiar and killed us both by drowning. A sad time. I am one of the few females Bast bestowed her gift upon, meaning most are male. Most interesting. They are. Why did you go to Earth? Long ago, Earthers came to live in the same systems where I live. I cocked my head. That meant the creature on the other side of the door was not from Earth. What an intriguing development. Perhaps the Earthers he referred to are those who escaped in the colony ships before Yellowstone erupted. They call you Shadow. Why? No harm in sharing my name. That's not my real one. Because I am all black, like a shadow cast by the sun. A strong and worthy name. Snarls caused my tail to puff up, and I felt the vibrations deep in my body. My companion is hungry. She carries cubs. We have not been fed recently. I hissed. One does not starve a female carrying young. When were you last fed? I am not certain. A short time after we launched. We've remained sealed ever since. So it would seem someone on board was an appointed agent. I will find a way to bring you food. It would be appreciated, but I do believe the door is the only way in or out. I doubted that. I knew vents and secret ways to the ship well. The creatures beyond would need air, and that meant a way inside. Okay, and I just finished. If you enjoyed my cat stories, I've got a few more.
All right, cool. Thanks, Dana. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and get to our next reader here. We've got Helen up next. So, got my wild friend here. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Amy?
Pretty good. Yeah, did you have a good Valentine's Day?
We don't talk about Valentine's Day in my house.
Okay, we don't talk about Valentine's Day. That's fine. Understandable. Okay. Well, what have you got for us tonight?
Well, in honor of that cursed holiday, I've been working on a story for a while. I don't know that I'll ever finish it, mostly because I can't figure out how to. But so this is a snippet from it. And at the moment, it's titled Love in the Slow Lane.
Nice. Okay. I will let you go forth and read it.
Okay. Last night, Lynn Crawford dreamt of being kissed. In the grand scheme of things, dreaming of a kiss was probably a fairly minor event in most people's lives. Yet the kiss in her dream had stayed with her, refusing to dissipate like dreams usually did. No doubt because kisses existed only in her dreams or her imagination these days. Remembering the kiss she dreamt of sent a wave of longing through her as she sat at her desk. She sighed and closed her eyes, remembering the man's breath on her ear, the slide of his fingertip up her neck that ignited a heat that made her gasp, the delicious electricity that struck her belly and left her wanting, yearning. He tilted her chin. She'd stared into his eyes as his hand slid around her neck and cupped the back of her head. He touched his lips, so soft and tentative to hers. Her heart had lurched as the kiss deepened, and she tasted a faint smoky tang of scotch. She drew his lower lip gently into her mouth and released it. Their tongues played with each other, exploring, possessing. She ran her hands through his silky hair at the nape of his neck and wrapped her other arm around his shoulder. His scent and the feel of his body pressed against hers shot another stab of sharp arousal through her. It had been so real, so vivid, it still was, that she yearned for him to take her, to make love to her. That swollen, achy need pulsed, a need to feel him moving inside her. And then he was gone. And even in her dream, she realized none of it had been real except the longing and the physical need. The dream had segued into something so mundane she couldn't remember it. And when she'd opened her eyes in the dark of her bedroom, all she'd felt was loss and longing. 24 hours later, she could still feel the kiss on her lips as she sat with the manuscript she was supposed to be reading, lying forgotten on her desk, and longed for a kiss like that. She shook her head to dispel the memory and focused on her work. Later that day, Lynn stood in her closet and rifled through her clothes. Janet, a younger co-worker she was friends with, had invited her to the art museum's member night party. It was the opening of an Impressionist exhibit and celebrated Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, it seemed, had to be worked into everything. She didn't hate the idea of Valentine's Day, just the disappointment it set you up for if you didn't have a partner or said partner forgot. She tried her best to get out of going with Janet, but that didn't fly. And Janet had arranged to pick her up at 7. Cocktail attire was required, and her cocktail attire was limited. There hadn't been much call for it in some time. At last she settled on a simple black dress. She stood in front of her full-length mirror and looked at herself critically. It was the only way she looked at herself anymore. She would be 60 years old in a month, a daunting birthday, the kind of milestone she'd just as soon not pass. She was still attractive. The still bothered her. Why wouldn't she be attractive? But she felt as if she couldn't leave the qualifier out. Her hair had always been light blonde, made going gray less obvious, and the gray strands blended and ended up making her look just more blonde. At least it would for a while, until she was all white-haired. Time had been relatively kind to her body and face. There were lines at the corners of her large blue eyes, and the creases that bracketed her mouth had deepened. There were faint indications of future jowls. But overall, her face was in good shape. Her body looked fine in clothes. Out of clothes, she wasn't so sure. She hated getting older. In her head, she was in her 30s. It's how she felt mentally and how she thought of herself. Her body, however, didn't look or act like that. And no one looking at you thinks you're 30 either, she thought. She sighed and sat down on the side of the bathtub. She wished she could think of a way to meet someone. Not to marry, probably not to live with either. She'd been married for 16 years before he cheated on her and left. Not doing that again, she muttered. But a friend with benefits, that sounded good to her, assuming she could find one. She had a lot of friends, and nearly all of them were female. The men in her life were husbands of friends or married clients. And that was another reason why kisses like she'd dreamed about were impossible to come by. Worst of all, she had no idea what to do about it. She tried online dating, which had been disappointing at best and a disaster at worst. In frustration, she somewhat jokingly mentioned to a friend about trying to find an escort service to provide some of those benefits. She'd been treated to a tale that made her rethink the idea. A friend of a friend had decided to hire an escort, and although Lynn had no idea how you discuss something like this, the woman had made it very clear she wanted the escort to provide sex. She'd done what most women would do. Got her hair done, got waxed, got her nails done, and bought new underwear and a new outfit. All for nothing. The escort arrived and they sat chatting on the couch for about an hour when the woman finally said, "This isn't what I paid for." To which the escort replied, "I don't do that." So an escort was out. Sex wasn't all Lynn wanted, but if a relationship was unobtainable, then sex would do, but neither appeared to be achievable. Unmarried friends of a similar age either had no interest in connecting with the guy at all, or they were just as baffled as she was about how to do it. She sighed and began to dress for the party, but at least it would get her out of the condo. "Wow, there are a lot of people here," Janet said as they moved into the reception area. "Well, this is a big exhibition and impressionists are always popular. I'd have been surprised if it wasn't well attended." "Lots of mover and shakers will be here tonight. Maybe a few will be single." Janet nudged Lynn in the ribs, jostling the glass of wine she held. "Careful," Lynn cautioned, raising her glass out of harm's way. "The problem is there'll be a reason they're single, or they'll be gay. Stop being so negative." "Well, it's easy for you to say. You have Michael. You haven't been on dating sites in a while, and you're not my age. Do you know what's out there for older women? Pretty much nothing." Janet was 30 years old. She was petite and attractive. Dark, wildly curly hair framed her face. She was funny, easy to be with, and they'd become friends. But she had absolutely no idea what it was like to be Lynn's age. "We'll go younger then. That might be interesting." Lynn laughed. "If I went younger and actually got lucky, I'd be afraid to undress in front of the guy. All the lights would have to be out, and I'd have to be falling down drunk. I'd have to confiscate his phone, or whatever happened between us would be all over Facebook and Instagram and God knows where else the next day." She really didn't want to continue this discussion. It was hard for a 30-something with a steady live-in partner to understand her predicament. "Let's get something to eat and then go look at the exhibit," Lynn said. Initially, they walked through rooms filled with art together. Didn't take Janet's patience long to run out when Lynn wanted to linger over several paintings. She stopped in front of a Mary Cassatt painting as Janet drifted away on her own viewing agenda. Lynn had always liked the soft colors of Cassatt's paintings and their lovely scenes between mothers and children. The painting reminded her of when her daughter was little, when she was still sweet and cuddly, giving off that scent so peculiar to babies, that scent that made you want to kiss their soft, pudgy cheeks endlessly without being pushed away or told to stop or see embarrassment flush their faces. "Ah, a Mary Cassatt fan. What in particular do you find appealing about her work?" Lynn startled and turned to find an overweight, balding man standing next to her whose collar or tie seemed too tight based on the color of his face. "I like her subject matter," she said, moving slightly away. He was too close, and she felt crowded. "Predictable, don't you think? A woman painting mothers and children? Her work's very saccharine and sentimental, I think." Lynn frowned. Apparently, her work's important enough to include in this exhibit. She wished he'd go away. Because he continued to stand next to her, she moved on. He followed, commenting annoyingly on each painting she approached. "I'm not a big fan of the Impressionists in general. Their work is too casual, too lazy for my taste." She wasn't going to get into a discussion about the talent it had taken to create the paintings on exhibit, but she couldn't help asking, "Then why are you here?" "I'm a lifetime sponsor of the museum. I come to all the opening night parties. You never know who you'll meet." Oh, God. He was on the make and had singled her out. Now she had to figure out how to get rid of him. "Why don't you come downstairs and allow me to get you a glass of wine? We could chat and get to know one another. Thank you, but I want to look at the exhibit. Well, I'll keep you company until you're through then. He is not going to leave or take a hint, she realized, trying to think something to discourage him. Adam Stanley had come up behind the man and woman talking and had watched them. She'd tried to sidestep the man a couple times and he had cut her off. Based on her stiff posture and her short replies, it looked as if she wasn't happy about the conversation. If they were together, he'd leave them to it. No point in getting between an unhappy couple. Moving closer and listening in as he pretended to view one of the paintings, he recognized the singularly unattractive Nathan Pettigrew, museum patron and pest extraordinaire. If you listened to women he'd stalked, and there was really no other way to describe it, he was impervious to a brush-off. Adam's heart rate kicked up when she turned her head slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her more than her profile, beautiful in spite of the frown. He'd listened to the lame lines Pettigrew tried on her and then reached his limit when he heard her say she was waiting for her partner who was parking the car, and watched Pettigrew as he continued to annoy her. Adam's sister and his daughter kept telling him he had to get out and try to meet some women. They assured him that women found his dark salt and pepper hair and his deep blue eyes very attractive, and that all he really needed to do was make an effort. He wasn't sure he believed that, and he wasn't sure he wanted to get out or meet anyone, but they fussed over him to the point of annoyance. He had no idea if she was actually waiting for someone, but Pettigrew was growing increasingly annoying. At least Adam could run him off until her partner showed up, if she had one. A final comment from Pettigrew sealed the decision. Finally found a parking place. The garage is absolutely packed tonight, he said, coming up beside her. He wanted to, but didn't go as far as to put his hand on her back. He didn't want to freak her out. She turned to look at him and blinked, her mouth parting in an O of surprise. The woman was clearly startled by his stepping in, but she recovered quickly. I'm glad to hear that, she stammered. I was wondering what was taking you so long. He smiled at her. She had a great voice, low and husky, and it made his heart speed up again. Her shoulder-length blonde hair had a sort of Kathleen Turner look to it. Sorry, darling. He watched as a faint blush crept up her neck, and her eyes took on a soft, dreamy look when he'd called her darling. I didn't mean to keep you waiting. Did you make a new friend? He said, turning to Pettigrew and giving him a rather feral, unfriendly smile, more bearing of teeth than a smile. He held out his hand. I'm Adam Stanley, he said, for her benefit, not Pettigrew's. Nathan Pettigrew. I was just keeping the lady company until you returned. Now that you're here, I'll say goodbye. Enjoy the exhibit, Pettigrew said as he sidled off. She hid a smile behind her hand. Thank you more than I can say for making him go away. I'm Lynn Crawford, she said, holding out her hand. He took her hand and held it just a little bit longer than necessary. It was soft, and the handshake was confidently strong. Desire, something he hadn't felt in a long time, stirred to life. I was eavesdropping, and I wasn't sure if you were actually waiting for someone or just trying to discourage Pettigrew. Seemed as if you needed some help. She nodded and blushed again. I wasn't waiting for anyone, but I did need some help. He's a very wealthy patron of the museum. I hope you won't have second thoughts about my intrusion. He flashed a smile at her and saw that dreamy look come into her eyes again. He could be King Midas, and I would still be grateful. What an incredible bore. He is, and apparently hard to discourage from what I hear. You hear correctly, she laughed. He was uncomfortable and unsure what to do, which took him by surprise. But it had been a while since he'd met a woman he was so attracted to. It had been a while since he'd even looked, and it had been years since he'd dated. In a mild panic, he looked around searching for his daughter, who had insisted they come to the party. He hoped she was somewhere nearby and finally saw her across the room talking to a small group of people he didn't recognize. She looked as if she was with old friends, but knowing his daughter, she'd only just met them. He was never sure where her social skills had come from. Certainly wasn't from him. I'm glad to have been of help. I should get back to the person I came with before I'm missed. It was lovely to meet you. He smiled again and walked off, kicking himself all the way back to his daughter's side. It seemed, in the 3 years since his wife had died, he'd lost the ability to flirt or carry on a conversation with the woman to whom he was attracted. It was lovely, Lynn whispered, as she watched him walk across the room to a woman who turned and smiled at him when he reached her and lightly touched her arm. The woman was early to mid-20s, if looks could be relied on, and a stunner. Her lips were pouty and painted bright red. Her dark hair was curled at the base of her neck in an elaborate knot. The severity of the hairdo only served to emphasize her strikingly gorgeous face and long, slender neck. She was poured into a knee-length red sheath whose back dipped nearly to her waist, and Lynn was sure the woman required no constricting undergarments to wear the dress. The outfit was accompanied by the highest and most painful-looking black heels that Lynn had ever seen. Men, she thought, and shook her head. They're so predictable. She turned back to the painting she had stopped at and frowned. Suddenly, the exhibit had lost its appeal. All she seemed to attract were the pedigrees of the world. All she wanted was an Adam Stanley, someone who would call her darling, someone who made her heart race as it had when he'd taken her hand. And he had a date with a gorgeous 20-something piece of eye candy, someone she could never compete with in any way. I'm going to die a born-again virgin, she thought, as she went to find Janet and talk her into leaving. The end.
Sorry, I was asleep at the switch. I was not asleep at the switch. I just was in the wrong window.
That's okay. That's okay.
So yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.
I totally was caught off guard. All right. Well, let's see. I will let you off of here, and we're going to add Emily on here. So, hi, Emily. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good. It's Wednesday.
Yeah.
Getting over the hump, you know. So, yeah, what are you reading for us tonight?
Well, typically I write paranormal romance. But I wanted to do something different. I've had several contemporary romance stories sort of floating around in my brain, but I decided to write a short story because I wanted to actually have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So this is something kind of new for me, as far as writing short stories, which is probably why I'm trying to stuff it into 20 minutes. I'm used to having a lot more room. But yeah, so it was a great exercise, I think, for me to get me back into the writing, kick what I need to be doing. So yeah, it's titled Mismatched, and it's meant to just be fun and funny and nothing too serious, but I don't know. We'll see what everybody thinks.
Okay. Yeah. Well, go for it.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So the title is Mismatched. All right. Now I'm doing a dual POV, which I haven't done. So this will be interesting. Ethan. Come out for dinner, they said. It'll be fun, they said, right before they dropped the bomb. I paused outside the restaurant, Ocean Prime, one of the most exclusive in downtown Denver. How Brad, my roommate, got reservations with 2 days' notice was another of his secrets. I straightened my jacket and tucked in my shirt for the third time. I'd have been happy to be the third wheel, as usual. Brad's fiancée loved to go to swanky places, and I often ended up being the odd man out if they convinced me to come along, which wasn't often. But this time Becca, Brad's fiancée, pushed until I gave in. I should have known something was up. Black smears on my hand caught my eye as I reached for the door handle. Damn, I thought I got it all. I pulled back and stepped to the side to hold the door and nodded to a couple in a suit and sparkly dress. I fit in about like a square peg in a round hole. The grease smudged the handkerchief I always carried, one habit my grandfather had passed down, along with the pressure of being third-generation fireman. I scrubbed at my fingers for a minute before I accepted the fact that nothing would get all the evidence of my working-class profession from my nail beds. Stuffing the linen back in my coat pocket, I gritted my teeth. It's not like I care anyway. I'm not here to impress anyone. Blind dates and me didn't mix. The last one ended in expletives, some I'd never even heard. But Brad pulled the best friend card when I tried to back out and said dinner was on him. I'd be sure to order extra drinks, the good stuff. That was the least he could do for setting me up with Becca's college roommate, Kathy or Candy or whatever her name was. All I knew was the stories Becca told us about her richer-than-shit kleptomaniac roommate. Hysterical stories, until you're expected to wine and dine the crazy bitch. I wrapped my fingers around my wrist. The cold metal of the watch unknotted my stomach as I pressed on the clasp to be sure it was tight. I hadn't taken the watch off since my grandfather passed away 6 months ago and left it to me, along with everything else he possessed. One last deep breath and I walked through the door. Warm air and the smell of fresh seafood washed over me. Expensive seafood. They probably charged a fee for breathing in the flipping scent. Do you have a reservation? The cute hostess smiled, her gaze lingering on my button-down shirt, the only one I owned, and a tad tight over my shoulders. It's under Mason. My friend is here already, I believe. My voice sounded odd, too formal, not me. She waved a hand. Right this way. We wove our way through the restaurant. Fine linen covered every surface, and by my judgment, expensive silverware and crystal graced the tables. Great idea! Bring a kleptomaniac to a place with sparkly stuff everywhere to steal. And Brad, the architect, was supposed to be the smart one of the two of us. The three sat in a curved booth toward the back of the dining area. Brad hopped from his seat when he spotted me. No escape now. Becca beamed and waved me to the booth. You're late, she scolded. We were just about to call you. I clapped a hand on Brad's back. Sorry, I had to clean up after work. My gaze moved to the woman sitting next to Becca. I blinked. The rest of my sentence gone from my brain in a flash. The woman nodded in greeting, and I remembered to close my gaping mouth. Blonde waves fell over her shoulders, and blue eyes gazed up from under her lashes. She'd be considered a knockout in any forum. But with stoked embers in my chest to a raging flame was her smile. Something about her smile seemed so familiar. Ethan, this is Cassie, my roommate back in the day. Nice to meet you, I managed. I've heard a lot about you. Too bad you're probably going to steal the silverware. Cassie. Talk about an undersell. Becca described Brad's roommate as a decent-looking stand-up guy. So nice to meet you as well, I returned his greeting, hoping Becca had left out some of our more scandalous escapades from college. Oh yeah, she set me up to drool and look like an idiot. I kicked her under the table and darted a glare at her knowing face while Ethan slid into the booth beside me. His broad shoulders and muscular biceps strained at the seams of his white button-down. If it ripped open... I tore my thoughts away from what his back must look like and met his gaze. Electrical shocks radiated through my torso. God, it's been a long dry spell, but geez. We ordered some appetizers, Brad said as he settled in and put an arm around Becca. She snuggled into him. They fit together like puzzle pieces. Even their names went together. Becca and Brad. How sickly sweet. I'd never been the jealous type, but seeing the two of them together, so in love, sent prickles of the emotion over my skin. Well, Ethan said from beside me, since Brad's buying, let's get a round of drinks going. His deep voice reverberated through my chest. I second that, I said, my voice coming out more cheerleader-esque than I'd planned. I cleared my throat. Ethan signaled the waiter. What do you have on tap? The waiter listed off a dozen microbrews, all local. Oh no, Brad said from across the table. You're going to have to cheat on Old Reliable. I furrowed my brow. Old Reliable? Ethan here is, let's say, a simple man, not a fan of microbrews. Brad smirked and leveled his gaze at Ethan. He's more of a Coors Light kind of guy. Nothing wrong with the silver bullet. Ethan's cheeks reddened and he tugged at his collar. Yeah, if you like the taste of watered-down piss, Brad laughed. It's a local brewery too, you know, Ethan answered. Well, we'll be sure to have a cooler of it at the wedding just for you, Becca said and elbowed Brad in the ribs. I glanced at Ethan, then said to Becca, I think Coors was all we drank in college. Brad nodded to the waiter. So I'll have a top-shelf dirty martini. My beautiful fiancé will have a Bailey's chocolate martini, and give him whatever beer you have that's close to Coors. The Celestial Lager would be as close as I can think, the waiter answered. For you, miss? I opened my mouth to order the lager as well, not really into the fancy drinks. Oh, she'll have the same as me, Becca jumped in. You have to try the martini. It's amazing. The waiter nodded and strode away. I chewed on the inside of my lip and picked up one of the many pieces of silverware in front of me, a small spoon. Becca and I had been friends forever, even before college. Of our 4 roommates, she was the only one I stayed in touch with, but she had always been the boss. Hairs on the back of my neck raising brought me out of my brooding. I glanced up to find Ethan eyeing me, and the spoon. God, he probably thinks I'm a fidgety freak. I went to set the spoon down, but it slipped from my fingers and fell into my purse on the bench seat next to me. Ethan's eyes grew wide and he glanced away. Oh, what a klutz. I grabbed the spoon and put it back in perfect order with the rest of the utensils. He didn't look my way or comment. The waiter returned with our drinks, and I downed half the martini without tasting it. Alcohol warmed its way to my stomach, my empty stomach. I grabbed the tiny garnish, a chocolate truffle, and slipped it off the miniature gold trident. Warmth entered my bloodstream and flowed over my body. I'd been a lightweight in college, but now I was flat out pathetic. Drinking was not a part of my life, except on special occasions. Almost marrying an alcoholic can have that effect on a person. Not only did he steal 5 years of my life, he'd ruined drinking for me. Bastard. His face flashed in my mind, and I downed the other half of the martini as if to prove to him that I was still whole, capable of having fun. I blinked. Blinking, I lifted my gaze to find the entire table's eyes on me. Someone's ready to get this party started. Brad signaled the waiter to bring me another. Oh, no, I tried to wave him off. I'll just have water, or... Stop, we're celebrating, Becca cut in, laughing. Maybe try to taste the next one. What are we celebrating? I asked, fidgeting with the gold trident. She rolled her eyes. You moving back here, of course. I can't wait to make the 4 of us going out a regular thing. Ethan chugged half his beer and waved to a passing server. I'll need another heavenly or whatever lagers. Guess I'm not the only one with some nerves going on. The appetizers arrived with my second drink and a full-blown buzz. The waiter cleared my empty glass and passed out small plates. Oh, here you go. Take this as well. Ethan plucked the gold trident from my still fidgeting fingers and held it up for the waiter. Don't want that one falling in your purse. I frowned. Thank you? No problem. He reached to fill his plate with tiny tacos, not touching the famous crab cakes. I munched on bread as I watched him. Was he avoiding eye contact? You're just being paranoid. It's been too long since you went on a date. So, Ethan, do you work for Brad and his firm? I got up the nerve to speak. Maybe the vodka was helping a bit. A dry chuckle huffed from his mouth. An architect? No, sorry to disappoint. Not at all. I didn't mean to. What is it that you do then? I'm a firefighter. He held out one hand over the white tablecloth. Got the soot and grease to prove it. His hands looked nearly raw from scrubbing, but a dark line had settled in the dry beds of his cuticles. I swallowed another bite of bread. Have you tried working hands? I asked. His brow furrowed and he actually met my gaze. It's a cream, I rushed on. My brother swears by it. He's an electrician. Really? His voice held a dump truck full of doubt. I glanced toward Becca. Everything I said seemed to be wrong. 3 brothers in the trades, actually. I tried for a joking tone. If you need a house built, they could probably do it. His lips pressed together. I stuffed more bread in my mouth. And what do you do? He asked. Mouth dry and half full of masticated goo, I reached for the water before I answered. I'm a financial advisor. So you handle people's money and retirement and stuff? On firmer ground, my voice strengthened. Yes, I can handle anything from insurance to old 401ks to investments. Oh, you should have her help you, Ethan. Becca leaned over and wrapped her arm around me. It's amazing what she can do with money. She tilted her head to speak more softly. Ethan lost his grandfather, but he does have an inheritance he could use help with. He looked at Becca as if she'd grown horns and his face reddened. I sighed at her insensitive mention of Ethan's loss and reached out a hand to put over his. I am so sorry for your loss. No matter how long we have them, losing someone is never easy. He nodded but pulled his hand away from mine. Guess I was the only one who felt those sparks. Ethan. My ears burned and I downed another few gulps of the expensive lager while I eyed the exit. We hadn't even ordered yet and I didn't know how much longer I could stand this meal. The logical part of my brain yelled for me to sit there and play the nice guy, while the more impulsive side was begging to be let out of the cage to do more than play with this gorgeous creature, even if she was already trying to pocket the silverware. The last thing you need is a one-night stand with her. You'd probably end up naked with no clothes or wallet in the morning. I adjusted the watch on my wrist and checked the time. Half an hour? It seemed like years. I realized everyone was waiting for me to say something in response to Cassie. Yeah, thank you. He was a hero, I swallowed emotion. Saved hundreds of lives before he retired. He was a fireman as well, Cassie asked. She seemed so genuine. If I hadn't seen her trying to palm a spoon and tiny fork, I wouldn't have believed Becca's stories about her. She'd made it sound like Cassie stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and not for any need. Her family was old money. Yeah, I'm third generation. I tried to buck the trend, but I guess it's in the genes. You didn't want to be a fireman, she asked. Brad jumped in. We met in college. Ethan was convinced he wanted to be a doctor, so he majored in biology. He wiggled his eyebrows suggestively. Wasn't your favorite class anatomy and physiology? He leaned in to get closer to Cassie. He can name all your little bits and pieces, and from what I hear through the walls, he knows how to use them. Becca swatted him in the chest. Stop trying to embarrass her, or you won't be seeing any of my bits and pieces. Cassie bit her lip and glanced to her lap, unable to meet my gaze. I shot Brad a glare. It was an old and very overused joke. Yeah, let me tell you how useless a biology degree is in the real world, I said lightly to move off the subject that obviously mortified Cassie. I can make about $15 an hour as a lab tech. What happened to med school? She lifted her head and focused on me, ignoring Brad. I grimaced. Turns out it cost too much. My dad convinced me not to weigh myself down with all that debt. He sounds like a smart man, she smiled until little lines appeared around her eyes. If you ever do have issues, I'd be happy to help you with any money questions you have. No thanks, I said more forcefully than I meant to. Brad sent me a what the fuck look, which I shot right back. It was one thing to make me sit through dinner with this chick, but to suggest I trust her with my money? Becca's story about finding an entire drawer full of silverware, knickknacks, and stolen jewelry, some of it hers, flashed through my mind. All I needed was some advisor to be skimming off the top of my accounts or investing in made-up companies until I had nothing left. What I mean is, I said more softly, is that there isn't enough money to be worth your time. I went for a grin, but it fell flat. I'm no millionaire. Cassie nodded. Actually, you don't have to be a millionaire. You're the exact type of person I love to work with. I bet I am, I huffed under my breath. I think I'm stupid enough not to catch on to you. Excuse me? Cassie's face crumpled, but her voice could have cut glass. Some advisors want to only work with the rich, but that's not my business model. I downed the last of my second beer. Are you sure finances is really the best idea? I cocked my head to the side. I mean, considering your past? Blue eyes blazed in my direction, just like the hottest part of any fire. Are we ready to order? The waiter saved me from 3 gawking faces at the table. Yep, I answered, picked up the menu for the first time and closed it again. Give me whatever's the most expensive dish on the menu. That would be our special. Fresh Maine lobster, pan-seared sea scallops, and king crab legs. God, I hate fish. Perfect. The waiter turned to Cassie, who stumbled through an order of Caesar salad with shrimp. By the time the orders were in, Becca had pulled Cassie into talking about wedding dresses. I straightened my cramped shoulder muscles and felt a stitch or two pop in my shirt. Shit. I resumed my hunched position. Brad caught my eye. Did something happen at work? No, I shrugged. The main engine was out of commission, so while they swapped out the transmission, I helped get the brakes replaced and a few other things. He nodded slowly. I adjusted my watch again. Great. Obviously, I'm the one being an asshole. Cassie. I forced myself to focus on Becca's overly animated description of her dress, while I scrambled to think of how I had offended Ethan. Every word we'd said since he walked in ran through my mind, and I could only come up with 2 possible conclusions. Either he hated me on sight, or he wasn't the sweet guy Becca had described him as. I sipped the chocolate martini and let the liquid roll over my tongue before I swallowed. It was amazing. One thing was for sure. Now that I'd recovered from the shock, the reason didn't matter. I didn't take shit from assholes anymore. I was thinking blue, but everyone goes with blue, don't you think? Becca's gaze rested on me. I struggled to think of what she'd been saying. Bridesmaids' dresses. You do whatever you like. Who cares what anyone else thinks? My gaze darted to Ethan, pouting like a 2-year-old and nursing his 3rd beer. You have impeccable taste. Just look at what a great guy Brad is. A snort sounded from Ethan's direction. 2 waiters arrived with the food and set plates in front of us. I picked up the smaller of the forks and stabbed a piece of romaine. We all busied ourselves with eating. Well, everyone except Ethan, who took one look at his steaming plate of seafood, nudged it further away, and reached for a roll. I popped a spicy shrimp in my mouth. Actually, it's really important to me what you think, Becca grinned and set her fork down. We have something to ask you both. She looked up into Brad's face. You ask, sweetie. Brad's lips turned up into a smirk. We didn't just bring you here to get dinner. A sigh escaped my lips. Thank God, since this blind date is a total shit show. You guys will probably be getting to know each other pretty well, Brad continued, if you both say yes, that is, to being my best man and the maid of honor. My gaze darted to Ethan. He looked like he'd just been asked to make out with a warthog. Spiked sea urchins rolled around my stomach, but I forced a smile to my lips. Of course, I'd love to be the maid of honor, if I don't kill the best man before the wedding. Ethan. They might as well have punched me in the gut. I blinked and took a drink of water to cover my irritation. I'd known the question was coming, but to put me with Cassie? Who in their right mind would ask her to be the maid of honor? I thought Becca had a best friend she was going to ask. Maybe she said no? The smell of the fish was all of a sudden too much, and I pushed my plate further away. It didn't help. Scraping the bottom of the barrel? The question came out before my mind had time to catch up with my tongue. Shit, no more beer for me. I chanced to glance at Cassie, expecting to find tears or some other girly emotions. Instead, her glare could have melted the polar ice caps. They must be to ask you, she said under her breath. I opened my mouth to respond, my left hand reaching for my wrist out of habit, but all it touched was skin, no metal. My gaze snapped to my wrist. The watch was gone, my grandfather's watch. Already frazzled nerves and my brain sputtered and snapped. My hand shook as I lifted my naked wrist, the skin neon white where the watch should have been. It's gone. Cassie's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I couldn't rip my gaze away from my bare wrist. The watch had been the 10th anniversary present for my grandfather from my grandmother. She'd saved for 2 years to be able to buy it for him. It was his most prized possession, especially after he lost Graham. Oh, shit, Brad exclaimed. Your watch. His glance darted to Becca and back to me. When was the last time you had it? Here, I said, going over it in my head. 5 minutes ago. Ripping the napkin out of my lap, I leapt from the booth, praying the watch would be on the seat. Nothing. No, it's not possible. It can't be gone. I fell to the floor and leaned under the booth to search. Don't worry, we'll find it, Brad said. I'm sure it has to be here. Then it hit me. She'd taken it. The rich kleptomaniac who could buy herself anything but got off on stealing other people's prized possessions. Fire in my gut heated my blood to boiling. This was enough. I didn't care how good-looking or rich she was. She wasn't getting away with this. I rose slowly to my full height and didn't bother to try to hide the disgust in my voice. I stared straight at Cassie. Give it back. Cassie. My eyes widened as I took in the large, extremely pissed-off guy who only an hour before I'd been drooling over. Instead of twitter-pating, his shoulders and bulk now appeared threatening. Very threatening. You think I have your watch? I gasped. I'll say this one more time. Give it back before I call the police and have your crazy ass thrown in jail. His voice left no room for doubt. He'd gone insane. Snapped. I don't have it. My voice came out shaking, not from fear. Rage at his accusation left me trembling with fury. Brad stood and put a hand on Ethan's chest. Dude, calm down. We'll figure this out. I'm sure Cassie has nothing to do with the watch. Ethan turned his daggers on Brad. How can you say that when you know what she is? My jaw clenched. What exactly am I? Is there a problem? The waiter asked, his forehead wrinkled in concern as other tables took notice of our display. No problem. Brad tried to laugh it off. Just a misunderstanding. Yes, there's a problem, Ethan shouted, pointed a finger at me. She stole my watch. The gaze of other diners weighed on me like 1,000 bricks, but I refused to duck my head. Instead, I sat straighter and lifted my chin. The waiter glanced between me and Ethan. You lost your watch, sir? No, I didn't lose it. She stole it. He mumbled something under his breath, but all I caught were the swear words. That's ridiculous, Becca jumped up to defend me. The clasp needed to be fixed when you got it. You can't possibly think Cassie would steal it. Ethan stared at her as if he'd never seen her before and shook his head. Let me check the booth for you, sir, the waiter said. You'd be amazed what we find between the cushions. He ran his fingers in the crook of the seat. Ethan waved his hand at me. You've been telling me stories for years about your kleptomaniac roommate who steals everything. And now you expect me to believe it's just a coincidence that a very expensive antique watch disappeared? The shirt, unable to stand the strain any longer, ripped at the shoulder seam, showing a flash of very well-defined muscle. His face flushed and the veins popped out on his neck. How could you even set me up with her? I mean, sure, she's hot, but I'm not that desperate. He turned to Becca, whose mouth was open, but she never got a chance to get a word out. And why the hell would you want her as your maid of honor? She'll probably steal all the wedding cash. What about your best friend? She at least sounded like a decent person. I closed my eyes as pieces fell into place. Half of me wanted to burst out laughing, and the other half wanted to throttle Ethan. A hand popped up beside me. Is this it? The waiter asked. It was pretty far back there, but I don't think it's damaged. The watch dangled from his fingertips. Ethan's mouth closed and opened repeatedly in a gape-mouthed fish impersonation. The laughing half of me won. I gripped my stomach as cackling laughter spilled out of me in waves so hard I snorted. You thought I was Caroline? I could barely breathe. Oh my God, why? Ethan's stare bounced between our three faces as Becca joined in my glee. Oh, that explains so much, Becca gasped between fits of giggles. But, Ethan managed, you tried to steal the spoon and the gold fork. His expression set me off again until Becca and I were leaning on each other, unable to sit up. Brad took the watch and apologized to the waiter. Dude, Cassie is Becca's best friend. They had 4 college roommates. He pressed the watch into Ethan's hand. The clasp dangled, broken. Caroline is the one you heard those stories about. I dropped the spoon, I gasped, because you made me nervous. I snorted and covered my nose. I haven't been on a date in over a year. It's going to be hard to top this one, Becca exclaimed. Brad nudged Ethan to sit down in the booth next to me and resumed his own seat. Ethan looked between me and the watch. You didn't mean to steal the spoon? He ran a hand over his face and looked towards the ceiling. I'm such an idiot. I can't disagree there, I said, then bit my lip. He looked horrified over the whole ordeal. With a deep breath, he straightened and turned to me. I am so sorry. I was extremely rude. I held back my giggles and tried to keep my gaze on his face and not his bare upper arm. Yes, you were. He reached out and took my hand. His warm skin heated mine. I'll understand if you never want to see me again. But I have one question to ask. I met his gaze and waited. Could we just start over? One side of my mouth quirked up. I moved my hand to shake his. It's so nice to meet you, Ethan. Something as tender as butterfly wings tickled my insides. I'm Cassandra, but my friends call me Cassie. That's the end.
Okay. Well, sounds pretty good, Emily. It seems like, a lot of people liked it. So, yay, you're a smash hit. All right. So let's see. I will let you off here. And let's see. Can add Pam Houston here. Let's see. I think you're muted, Pam. Oh, now you're not muted.
Right.
Cool. So you are thinking about trying to share some photos for a photo essay?
Let me just see what happens.
Okay.
It may not work. And if it doesn't work, we can if it doesn't work, we'll just go a different way.
Okay, sounds good.
No, maybe not.
It's not happening.
It's not giving me that option here. What do you see now?
I just see you now.
Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Let's not do that.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm not that familiar with Chrome, so it's probably because I don't know how to use Chrome, but that is okay. We're going to do something completely different.
Okay.
I'm going to read two short essays.
Okay.
The first one very short, and the second one just a little longer, but it won't be 20 minutes altogether. The first one is a letter. I was asked to contribute to an anthology that was about letters to a stranger. So you were supposed to just write a letter to someone who caught your eye or, made some kind of contact with you that was momentary, but you were, moved to write them a letter.
Okay. So
So
it's
that's the first thing. And it's just 800 words.
sort of like misconnections.
Kind of like that. Yeah.
All
So
right.
this is dear 20-something German woman who was helping the Icelanders bring the sheep down the North Valley above Lagerflat on the night before the Rettir. This is Iceland, happening in Iceland. To begin, I must admit I am no one you know and ask you to excuse my forwardness. I am a 57-year-old American woman who visited Iceland this September, and I happened to be at Abegdasetter, forgive that, when you and the men came riding down the dirt track in North Valley, pushing ahead of you 1,500 sheep. You had come all the way from Lagerfell Hot Springs, a distance of more than 20 kilometers, gathering sheep from the highlands along the east side of the Jökulsá River. I was on foot when you arrived, high up on the side of the hill, helping the men who, together with their sheepdogs, were pushing the sheep you were driving down along that final fence, the one with the pens at the bottom, where they'd stay overnight, packed in like sardines and bleeding like crazy until tomorrow when you and the others would move them on down valley to the Rettir. There is no English equivalent for the word Rettir because it is both the name of the wheel made from wood or stone that holds hundreds of sheep in pie-sliced compartments, and the name of the yearly event where farmers sort the sheep into that wheel, one pie slice per farmer. Rettir means sheep party, one of the men I followed up the hillside had said. As I watched you dismount, sling your saddle off your horse's back and place it on the crossbar of a fence for airing, I guessed it was your second summer in Iceland, and also that there is a young man waiting for you back in Berlin who writes computer code and will one day have a very good job. Perhaps last summer you went home on the 15th of August so the two of you could have a Croatian holiday before you returned to university. And when you told him only a few weeks ago that this year you planned to stay in Iceland until the end of September, till after the secondary Rettir where you and the men will pick up all the strays, there was a silence on the line for a good 60 seconds before he said he was late to have a beer with his mates. Maybe if you were being honest with yourself, you would admit that you miss your Hanoverian gelding Till, a bright bay with high withers and a floaty extended trot just made for the dressage ring, more than your code-writing boyfriend. But these Icelandic horses, with their stocky bodies, their get up and go, and their honest, ever-expanding hearts have gotten your attention, have made you forget a little, even Till. This summer when you arrived, the farmer took you up to the wild herd and let you choose a 4-year-old gelding to train up by yourself, and you did, a flea-bitten gray with an unusually dark mane you named Naturhimin, Nader for short, Icelandic for night sky. He was a good learner from the start, a horse prone to making the right decision. The trust built between you all summer long, but never more than this day of the gathering, tolting down the high sides of the valley, shoulder to shoulder with a dozen men 3 times your age on horses they halter broke before the turn of the century. Nader followed those tried and true horses over ancient lava flows, leaping downhill over glacial erratics, dodging holes with a kind of intuition you'd never seen before, holes that would have snapped Till's long legs like matchsticks. Together you were tireless, up and down the valley wall, finding the strays and loners who hid in the crags and steeps or wandered up and over the top and into the highlands where they would never survive the winter. Nader never shied nor stumbled, not when a particularly defiant ewe mock charged him, not even when the caribou yearling, most likely abandoned by his mother and hanging with the ewes and lambs for the summer, came galumphing down the hill beside you, insisting that wherever those sheep were going, he was too. Don't think it hasn't occurred to you to put Nader on a boat and take him back to Berlin and straight into endurance training. But then you think about the long, hot German summer, the stall he'd be forced to stand in every day, and how even if you could find a good turnout situation, he'd never graze again along a glacial-fed river or fill his lungs with this crystal air or doze under the northern lights, his legs tucked under him like a deer. As you ate the bread and apples the farmer's wife brought out, as you took the mandatory shot of Brennivin, you kept your eyes on Nader, checking for lameness, making sure he was cooled down. Then you were up and moving toward the sheep pen, the first one over the fence, shushing them toward the chute, moving half of them to the lower pen so they would have a place to lie down tonight, enough room to turn around. Panicked lambs bleated for ewes and vice versa, and you moved with the wave of them, advancing and receding, resisting and capitulating. You knew some half of these lambs would go to slaughter, but not tonight, not tomorrow. This is how the world feeds the world, you thought. 4 solid months of bliss up in the highlands, and then everything changes. You too were changing. The air in the pen prickled with the change. Even the men who'd been so cool all day, who wouldn't answer any of your questions except in Icelandic, who were simultaneously chaffed and impressed that a girl could keep up, could hang in, could not lose her seat or her temper or her mind, going up and down those steeps all day, just you and Nader, one body, moving a lot of other bodies, food for the family, home and safe for the winter, more lambs the next spring. Even those men were tired and impatient, but not you. No. You had burnished roses in your cheeks, the pure joy that came with 20 miles of hard riding in wild and clean terrain with a job well done in a centuries-old tradition that by some twist of fate you'd been allowed to fully participate in this country that sits in the place where the North American tectonic plate and the European tectonic plate are pulling apart from each other at the rate of 18 centimeters per year. There you were, saying shush, shush, shush to those sheep in the pen, alive in every cell and as beautiful a human being as I have ever seen. You had a star inside your chest and it was glowing like a supernova. Your heart had expanded to the size of an Icelandic horse's named after the night sky, or a spring lamb's set out to pasture with her twin sister and her mom, the whole summer ahead to look forward to. I am writing you now because you may not have known how wondrous you were in that moment. My hope is that you will take that day into consideration as you make decisions about how to live your life. Sincerely, Pam Houston. And then this one I wrote for an anthology called Alone Together, which was an anthology that a lot of interesting and cool women put together to raise money for independent bookstores. And a lot of writers contributed a short essay to that. Back in the early stages of the pandemic. This is called Stamina. A lamb was born here on Saturday, a little ram. And when I say little, I mean it. He was a preemie, born late in the spring, conceived a month after the usual end of mating season. The last thing we need around here is another ram. We have 2 already. And though they are best friends, they spend most of their time with the top of their heads grotesquely bloodied, doing to each other exactly as their name suggests. Sometimes for fun, they ram me, taking me down from behind at the knees. These are Icelandic sheep, which are, any shearer will confirm, the wildest of the domestic breeds. The rams have large circular horns, big enough to do some damage. My Icelandics have fought off coyotes, a mountain lion, and a black bear. And though some of them lost the battle, some of them, including Elsie, the mother of this little preemie, won. Which is why she is alive to birth another ram, which I mentioned is the last thing we need. It is the ewes who protect the herd from predators, while the rams, the one with the great big horns, cower in the back. It is also the ewes who protect their babies from the very rams who provided the sperm that created them. I have seen a ram toss a newborn into the air minutes after birth. Luckily, rams bounce. The ranchers in this valley will tell you it is only the boys the rams go after in order to cut down competition. But I have seen a ram lift a tiny mewling female into the air likewise. And as I was running to get them separated, I have seen the 5-minute postpartum ewe pin that ram, who weighs a third again as much as she does, to the ground. Saturday's lamb was the tiniest ever and more than a little listless, not eager to nurse. Icelandics always give birth mid-morning, so the baby has the maximum hours of warmth and daylight to get steady on his feet and well-fed. Over the course of the long afternoon, I prompted the little ram to nurse successfully at least twice, but Elsie wasn't doing much to encourage him, which made me think she had already given him up for dead. There is always the thought when a ewe shows little interest that she might know more than I do, might know the lamb has some kind of genetic defect or that one of his internal systems isn't right. I live at high altitude, so even this far into May, the temperature was forecast to dip into the low 20s. After nightfall, Elsie wasn't even trying to keep the little ram warm, and he was too out of it to seek comfort himself. I bundled up in my fleece-lined pants, my down parka, and wool hat to sleep in the barn with Elsie and her baby. Why didn't I take the baby into the warm house with me? I was still hoping Elsie wouldn't reject him outright. Bottle babies are a lot of fun, but they rarely get the nutrition and antibodies they need to thrive to their fullest capacity. What you learn on a ranch is that the sweetest things die. And there are few things in the world sweeter than the tight, tight curls of a newborn Icelandic sheep, or the warm breath that rises up and out of him, or when he licks your chin with his tiny pink tongue. A year from now, should this baby live, he will be big and strong enough to break my kneecaps. But this summer, he will bound around the pasture chasing butterflies, baaing his sweet high-pitched baa and tumbling through the grass with his older girl cousins. Most of my neighbors would tell you I had already gone too far trying to save him, that I should always let nature take its course. But I'm not a rancher. I'm a writer, a teacher, a progressive, an activist, a woman who raises Icelandic sheep and names them. COVID has kept me home for 3 solid months and connected me more intensely than ever to my animals. Sleeping in the barn with the preemie feels like a natural extension of all of that. Elsie bedded down away from the lamb, and I lowered myself to the ground with my back against a haystack and pulled the baby onto my lap. He snuggled into my down jacket, making little sucking sounds. Every time he wanted up, I let him. But then he would just stand there, staring at the wall, swaying, so I would scoop him back up and he'd bed down again. At first light, I got him to nurse a little, but Elsie wouldn't stand still long enough for him to get much milk. By 8 a.m., he had lost the use of his back legs and was shaking, no matter how tight I held him, a sure sign he was starving to death. There is no substitute for authentic ewe's milk, but I went to the house and mixed up some Save-A-Lamb milk replacer. The baby was too weak to suck, too weak by then to care. So I force-fed him, not with a tube, just with a bottle. I forced the nipple in his mouth and rubbed his throat to make him swallow and didn't let him out of my lap until 2 ounces of the milk was gone. With newborns, if you're going to see improvement with milk replacer, you usually see it quickly, and I wasn't seeing much. He had stopped shaking, but his eyes were dull and he was still unwilling to stand. By that time, I decided if he was going to die, I could give him some comfort while he did it. I rocked him and kissed his lanolin-smelling head, his sweet little nubbins of horns. He weighed, it seemed, almost nothing. Elsie watched me, a little coldly, I thought, from her corner of the enclosure. "What do you know that I don't know?" I asked her, but she just chewed her cud. I didn't know what was wrong with the little ram, but I did know that 100,000 Americans would be dead from COVID by the end of the weekend. I knew the real number was actually higher because several states, Florida, Georgia, Texas, had been cooking their COVID books. I knew the vast majority of the dead, grandmothers and grandfathers, husbands and wives, doctors and nurses, daughters and sons, had died with their loved ones there, without their loved ones there beside them. And I knew tens of thousands of those deaths were unnecessary, due only to the colossal failure, perhaps intentional, of the Trump administration and its enablers in the GOP. I knew that our government was being intentionally dismantled from within. I knew that by virtue of being an outspoken woman, I was no longer safe here at my beloved ranch. And I also knew that on the scale of who is safe and who is not safe in this country, I fared infinitely better than most. I knew that it was long past time for those selfish and shameful men to relinquish control of this country into the hands of women. I knew that it was time for women to step into the power that they have been gaslighted out of believing was theirs all along. I knew I had some role in that perhaps we all did, and I knew I needed to figure out what it was. I spent all day Sunday in the barn and force-fed that little ram 6 more times, 2 ounces every 2 hours. He got so sick of me shoving the rubber nipple into his mouth that the 7th time he got up, bobbed and weaved over to Elsie and started nursing. I spent Sunday night in the barn too, but by then he was toddling around again and Elsie was showing a bit more interest. Mostly he slept curled against her, coming over to sniff at me once an hour or so, maybe making sure I was warm enough. By Monday morning, it seemed for the first time that the little ram might make it. Before the day was over, a Minneapolis policeman named Derek Chauvin would kneel on the neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, killing him. When I was a girl, my father broke many things that belonged to me, my femur and my hymen, to name the 2 most significant. He crumpled 16 of his cars around my body and his own, driving drunk and careless and angry. Then there was the psychological torture, which I still insist was the worst torture of all. Surviving my father's house took hypervigilance and wiliness, the ability to separate my mind from whatever was being done to my body. Most of all, it took stamina, 17 years of it. The drumbeat always in my head saying, keep your eyes open, plan for the worst case scenario, stay alive at any cost, survive long enough to get out. By first light on Tuesday, the little ram's legs worked perfectly. I spent parts of the next 3 days and nights in the barn, and then it warmed up enough to send me back to my own bed. Now he's a week old, skipping across the outdoor enclosure, bouncing off the walls of the stall, crawling all over Elsie, and ramming the holy hell out of the water trough. He weighs 4 times what he did last Saturday, and when I lift him, I feel his warm, rounded belly full. The milk replacer is closed up and put away for next year, and even now, every time he sees me, he runs straight over to Elsie to nurse. I'm not any sort of hero. I saved the ram because I thought maybe I could. I saved him because none of my heartfelt writing, nor my activism, nor my passionate progressive values could save George Floyd. I saved him because cities are burning all across my country, and a man I can't keep straight anymore from my dead father promised to do this to us, and now he is doing it every day. I saved him to mitigate, if slightly, the wave of grief that is raining down on us, to prove to myself that I have both the strength and the stamina to save at least one small fragile thing. I left my father's house when I was 17 and did not expect to find myself at 58 back in it, along with my 330 million brothers and sisters. To beat COVID, to beat these soulless goons whose end game is always cruelty for cruelty's sake, we are going to have to play the long game, all of us together, even if the men with the big horns cower in the back. I can't run quite as fast as I used to, nor kick quite as hard, but what I haven't lost over the decades is stamina. Sleeping in the barn for a week to save a lamb whose mother left it for dead may not sound like much, but my mother left me for dead too, so often in my father's bed. And now you ought to see how I can ram a water trough. You ought to see how I still bounce. Elsie looks at me with a little more respect these days than she used to. In the wilds of Iceland, she might have had to abandon that baby. But here she has a barn full of hay and a woman just tenacious enough to believe she can save anything. Maybe some lives, maybe democracy. This morning, and only this morning, I named the little ram Tank.
Tank's a great name.
That's a picture of Tank. That's Tanky.
Oh my God, he's so cute. And there's a little tongue.
Yeah.
Oh, well, those were both such great pieces. And yeah, and so I was looking at Alone Together, because I know I heard something about it when it came out, and I don't know like where my head was at that point, probably up my butt somewhere, who knows. But anyway, so yeah, but I mean, that was a really, really great piece. And, you know, yeah, several people are crying now. I'm like, okay. All right. Well, I'm going to, I don't know, did you want to talk a little bit about your experience with COVID? I think you mentioned, I thought I saw something on Facebook about you got it and ended up having some complications from it.
Yeah, I got it, before we knew it was COVID. I got it in early February because I'm always traveling, and I was in the Seattle airport, I was in the San Francisco airport, I was in all the airports, um, and I can't be sure I got it, of course, because there was no test, but I certainly had all the symptoms, including loss of taste and smell, and it wasn't like any flu I've ever had. So I had it really early. Um, and then I got better, and then I got worse again. And, I didn't get COVID again, but I was just, I never recovered my energy level. And I started to have all kinds of weird heart stuff, and just like galloping heart, and I would just be out of breath for no reason. And, those kinds of long hauler things, a lot of anxiety. I think the long hauler people are really sharing that they have like either depression or anxiety, like some kind of brain stuff. And mine showed up as this kind of weird bodily anxiety. Like it wasn't even necessarily tied to anything, although there was plenty to be anxious about, but it was just like, this jittery feeling, which is not really me. I'm getting a lot better. I'm out here in Washington State at sea level, and it's really helping me, actually. It's helping me be at sea level, and it's helping me sleep. And so I expect to recover. I'm starting to feel like I'm really coming back, but it was a long haul of feeling like, just wondering if I'd ever have my normal level of energy. But, I think it's so hard to tell, I mean, as I talk about in that piece, it was such a difficult year, for so many reasons. And, I personally felt so, tortured by a torturer, who was the president. And I think that's, I think it's hard to know. I mean, maybe the lesson of this COVID time is that there really isn't as much separation between like physical health and emotional health as we think, because, there were times when I just thought, no, I'm just depressed and afraid, like I'm not sick. But then my heart would do these weird kind of like dancing across the room out of my body. I'd be like, no, that's a physical symptom. But it was kind of hard to tell, which it was. And I think it was both, together somehow. But I do feel a lot better. I feel much stronger. I'm coming back to Colorado at the end of March, and, then I'll be back at elevation, and we'll see how I do. But
okay. Yeah, I was kind of wondering, because it's like, you mentioned the time zone that you're in, and I was just like, oh, I thought that she was in Colorado, so I wonder where she is. So it's like,
yeah, no, I'm in Washington State. Like I really came out here just to be away from the politics in Colorado, honestly. Like Lauren Boebert is my rep, and I just don't know how to handle that. So I literally ran away to Vashon Island and just wanted to feel better, and kind of get away from the guns, and just kind of be out here and hope that, by the time I go back, things have calmed down a little,
Yeah, it would be nice, right? All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and bring the other folks back here. Do you want to hang out with us for a bit, or?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, cool. All right. So I got Katie here. Oh, Katie is having fun here. All right. We got Dana and Helen. So yeah. I don't know. Does anybody have anything they want to share? I'll pick on Helen.
Yeah. Share in regards to what? Just writing or whatever?
Yeah, just writing or whatever, or anything anybody read tonight.
Well, I've read a couple good books recently. I like that The Searcher by Tana French. That was quite good. And then one of my favorite authors, Jane Harper, she's Australian. Her new one, The Survivors, came out, and it was really good. Her books are the kind of books where you almost don't want to start them because you don't want them to be finished. They're so good. So I've been kind of just reading and hanging out, and that's my life these days: writing, reading, and the occasional dance class. So
Yeah, I've been seeing the pictures. Looks like, you've got some very glamorous outfits out there.
I miss the competitions. My friends and I haven't been to one since October of 2019 because of COVID. And they're starting the competitions up again, but I don't know. I'm just a little leery of doing that just yet. I wanna wait a while.
Yeah, don't want the plague.
Yeah.
So Emily, Deb Courtney says you should definitely expand that story into it. So are you thinking about doing that?
I hadn't until I let my mom is sort of my alpha reader, so she reads everything I write when it's because I wrote that story yesterday, pretty much yesterday. I had an unexpected day off from homeschooling, so that's when I wrote it, and she read it and she was like, "Oh, this is a book." And I was like, "Oh, wait, I'd have to like change the ending and like make her not forgive him, and then they'd like have to go through this whole." So I was like, "No, I can't do that." And I'm like, "Oh, I could just change this part, and then that would like be the whole, and then have to be together, being the best man and the maid of honor, kind of like almost a enemies to lovers type trope." But so I don't know. I mean, I've got like 5 other books on the list. I have to get the 4th book of my paranormal series to my editor, which I had said I was going to do last month, and it didn't happen. Homeschooling takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And then we got a puppy, and I don't know. So yeah, I have to finish the 4th book. And then I have a revise and resubmit request for a romantic suspense that I need to get back in. So, but this will definitely go into my idea list of, potential books that I would like to go back to and write, because I did enjoy the characters, and I think I would like to develop them more. So yeah, so it'd be fun. We'll see. Maybe in a year or 2 when I'm caught up.
All right, cool. And Dana, are you going to be doing any more cat pyre stories or anything like that? What are you thinking?
I'm actually working them into I have a trilogy going on, and I'm almost finished with the 2nd book. The 1st book was Winter Awakening, the 2nd one's Winter Emergence, the 3rd one would be Winter Moon. And that's actually when one of the vampire cats shows up in that one. I tend to like merge all my stories. Something I learned to do while I was writing fan fiction. And I'm also working on the sequel to God. No, it's not really a sequel to God's Gift. It's part of that same series, though. And I have wandered into the genre of romance. And I actually published 4 online. They're short stories or novellas. And I've got another one I'm getting ready to post, one that I'm working on that's a Gothic romance, which I'm trying my hand at. So I'm just kind of having a lot of fun, and my first paranormal romance is currently submitted to a publisher.
Oh, wow.
So
Exciting.
I wrote that one in 2 months. I have never written a book in 2 months, ever.
I have not either, so I am way behind right now on a manuscript that I've been saying is going to be done, it's going to be done, it's going to be done, and 3 years later it's not done. That's slow for me for a crappy draft, but a lot's been going on, so I'm trying to give myself some grace on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean, 2020 is challenging for a lot of us, but I keep track of how many submissions I did. I did 21 submissions last year.
It's pretty good.
And self-published 4 things. So I'm like, how'd I do that?
Yeah, well, it's pretty amazing, what we can do when we set our minds to it. But yeah, go you, I mean, fun keeping on. So Katie, are you thinking of making the romance stuff a habit, or are you thinking this was just, you were just dipping your toe in?
Well, whenever I do the stories live, it's always an original short story. But when I was working on The Lady in Gray, I was like, well, there's a whole lot more that I could say. So I'm going to basically expound on it and turn it into a novella. But then after that, that's going to be it as far as romance is concerned. I'm going to basically stay in my lane and stick with my own wheelhouse. So, I'm gonna stick with the whole horror and young adult fantasy, but I'm gonna leave the romance to the Helen Starbucks of the world.
Or the Emilys.
Or the Emilys, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, Emily and Helen, really kind of started something on here because, it was like, I can't remember which one of you it was, but like people were just like, oh my gosh, you should have more of this kind of thing on here. So then I was like, okay, I definitely need to, balance things out and, have more of, the, girl perspective, which, I'm into anyway, but, it's just, I've always tried to be like, no, gotta be balanced, So,
I know whenever Helen is doing a story, I can always expect something a little bit on the steamy side.
Well, a girl's got a dream.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with it at all.
No, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense, with the, especially Valentine's Day and everything. And
well, I just, I wanted to get an older woman's perspective out there because I love romantic suspense and romances, but they're all 20, 30 somethings, and it's like, yeah, well, I'm out of that market. So, I thought, well, let's talk about those of us who've aged a bit.
My mom didn't meet the love of her life until she was 65.
oh, wow.
She's extremely happy, and they've been together for years, and is a perfect guy for her. So
sometime we should have a dating horror stories session.
We should. I have so many.
Your experience with online and dating services. And actually, the escort story is a true life story.
Oh my!
No way.
Oh yes, ma'am. Oh yes,
ma'am. Like that. Well, I don't do that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to her. And God love her. I mean, I know this woman. She's quite a feisty person, and she refused to pay the guy. And it was like, oh my God, I just paid him to get rid of him.
Right. Yeah. Just let's pretend this never happened. It's fine.
And I was like, really? Well, you've just shot down one of my fantasies, but probably good to know.
Actually, you'd be happy to know that there are a number of romance writers who are starting to write those older characters. I'm one of them.
Well, good.
So, yeah, my paranormal has middle-aged characters, the one that's at the publisher right now. And the one that I'm actually working on right now to get online is all middle-aged characters. I'm like, yes, I write 20s and 30s, but I also write older ones too. And I'm hearing a lot of women say, we want to see the older ones. And people like Harlequin are going, no, not happening here.
No, that sounds like Harlequin. Yeah. So let's see, Pam Houston, not sure if you're still here, but we have.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just getting dinner off the set, but I am here. I'm
right.
Every word I've heard.
The struggle is real. I know with the girls got to eat. Yeah. So Deb says condolences for COVID and Bobert. So are you with your ranch? Is that over on the western slope? Or where is
it? It's technically not on the western slope. It's actually on the east side of the divide. So, but it's in southwestern Colorado. Crete is in southwestern Colorado, and we're just over the divide from the Western Slope, but we are District 3, which is Lauren Boebert's district. And we're big on guns and some other things that aren't really my thing. My things, but we're, I mean, I don't know, I was afraid there this year, because I'm outspoken, and people would say, well, if you don't want to get death threats, just shut up. And I'd be like, well, don't really want to shut up. So I don't know if that's, the permanent place for me anymore. I might need to find a new place. I mean, I've always loved Denver, and, I really love, so I have so many good friends on the Front Range. I'm just, in this time, I'm just a little too far out, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm also wondering, I mean, just like, I read, Cowboys Are My Weakness and loved it. And I was like, oh, okay, yes, this is actually, finally like, something where I'm like reading it and I'm like, yes, this is kind of like along the lines of the stuff I like to write. So, not as well, but, anyway, like, I was just wondering, like, I mean, I suspect that like a lot of that material hit pretty close to home. And I know that what you read tonight definitely did. And, I mean, there are all kinds of reasons. I saw that you were born in Trenton, New Jersey. I mean, I lived in New Jersey for 11 years. Lots of reasons to want to get the F out of Jersey. But anyway, I'm just wondering, like, how did you kind of get up the nerve to just, put these stories that are pretty personal out there? Or do you just not think about it and just do it because it needs to be done?
Well, all of my, Deep Creek was like my 6th book, I think, and all of them are autobiographical in one way or another. If some of them are called fiction and some of them are called nonfiction, but they're all kind of more or less my story. And I guess it's just really about the method. My method is to pay really strict attention in the world and write down things that, write down the concrete physical objects of the world that mean something to me. And that leads to me writing stories where I have a role or some character who's based on me. I'm writing 3rd-person stories at the moment. But it's a really close 3rd person. And, it's a woman of a certain age who's, trying to do the world a little better. So it always is related to me. And it's really just the way I learned how to write. It's just how I started writing. I wrote to make sense, of the chaos that was my childhood. And so it's just how I learned how to write. And I know Barry Lopez says we're pattern makers. And if our patterns are beautiful and true enough, they have the power to bring someone for whom the world has become chaotic and disorganized up from their knees and back to life. And I think that's how like art functions in my world. And as a result, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes people get really mad at me for what I say, or sometimes I have to write away from the truth a little bit to protect someone, or sometimes, but revealing myself, that's not that hard for me. Honestly, I feel like we connect through our flaws. And I feel like, we're all down in our little holes of self-hatred, and like you knock on the wall and there's somebody over there in their hole next to you. They knock back. And, I kind of think that's what the writing business is. So I sometimes worry about hurting other people, and that's a challenge, something we talk about endlessly, but I don't that much worry about myself. I'm confessional. I'm kind of one of those people who'll sit down on a plane, and if the person wants to know, I'll tell them, I'm kind of a storyteller by nature. And I think you have to make yourself vulnerable to tell a story. So it's just kind of my method. It's just what I do. It's just how I've always done it. You know, somebody said writing's pushing on a bruise. I don't remember who said that. Maybe Steve Almond, maybe somebody else. Maybe Steve Almond quoted somebody saying writing is pushing on a bruise, but that's what I'm kind of always going for. I'm always trying to push on the bruise.
All right. Well, that sounds pretty good. And, you know, it's a great way of saying, you know, go for the pain without, you know, quoting Hemingway. Because, I mean, Hemingway was kind of a sexist ass turkey in a lot of ways. So who wants to say open a vein?
Yeah.
Helen's
Well,
like,
I have not heard that description before, but I like it.
Given
All
the
right.
time period, you've been correct.
All right. Well, it is a little after 9 o'clock, and I know a lot of us are going to be pumping soon. So I'll just sign us off. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
Thank you. I really enjoyed everybody's reading.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Right.
Good night. All right. Oops, sorry. All right. So yeah, I'm just going to sign us off here. Let's see. What are the things? Oh, yes. So just before I pop off here, really quick, if you have not subscribed, please do subscribe, because it actually does make it easier for people to find the show if you do. Because then we can actually get a customized link on YouTube, and then I don't have to, you know, send out the gobbledygook link every time. I'm going to double check this, but it does appear that our next Stories Live will be on March 17th. And that's actually the anniversary show, because we will have officially done a year's worth of episodes by then. And the theme is achievements. And it's kind of a mixed thing. I think it's sort of bittersweet, because part of the reason I started this show is we have the pandemic and there were no more in-person open mics. So this is what I decided to do. But, you know, it has been a great show. And, you know, we've had previous broadcasts like this one, and they're all up. You can browse through them. I've bookmarked everything. So, you know, you can just, if you don't want to go through the whole show and you just want to like click on the reader that you want to hear, you can actually do that. There's a table of contents for every episode. So anyway, I'm going to go and probably snack on something very unhealthy, but I hope you have a great night and a great rest of the week, and I'll see you in a month. All right. Good night.